Hi and welcome back. My name is Reb, and today we are doing something a little different, or that I haven't done on this channel in a while, which is talk about printmaking, specifically lino print. I know I've got a mess here. I will explain everything, but first and foremost, let me apologize about my nails. Don't come at me. I have been gardening and we've got super fine dirt that's super hard to clean. And we're about to get messy anyway, so like I said, I apologize, they look gross. All of that being said, let's move on to what I've got going on here. So this story begins with some ink. I went to the art store just to get some refills on some stuff that I needed, and I saw this like really pretty kind of coral colored ink by Speedball. It's a oil-based relief ink, and I really wanted to try out oil-based ink, but this one was like $20 and a little bit out of my price range, so I passed it up. But I couldn't stop thinking about the ink, so I went back and I was fully committed to just going ahead and spending the $20 and buying it. And when I took it to the register, it ended up only being $10 because apparently this little tag means half off. I did not know that. So of course I ran back to the printmaking aisle to see if they had any more ink, and they also had this green one, which had the same price tag. So I ended up getting both. I thought these colors really kind of were very complementary of each other, and I already had some like immediate ideas about what I wanted to do with them. First things first, I did a little bit of swatching. So this swatch here is the two colors and then different variations of them mixed together, and they came out with some really beautiful like toned down colors that I really like literally these are some of my like favorite colors right here. So that was really cool. And then I did some just black and white mixed with the original color, and those also gave some really pretty colors. So I thought that the amount of colors that I could get just from these two cans plus black and white was really good, and that's not even considering, you know, all the other colors I could mix with them. So moving on from there, I thought I really wanted to challenge myself to make a two-color print. So I drew a little flower on some existing lino print lino that I had, and I just kind of free sketched this one. I knew that I just wanted to do something kind of quick and not easy, but just organic, so I wasn't too concerned about it being perfect or anything like that. So I carved this little flower, which maybe you guys call it something else where you're at, but the only name that I've heard is Indian paintbrush. When I looked it up, I also saw that sometimes people call it fire on the prairie, which is one of my favorite flowers. It is almost exactly this same color, at least the top of it is this like corally kind of orangey pink color. So I thought that this would be a perfect one to try out first, and I'll show you that print. Let me go grab it so you can see it. So these are the little test prints that I made. They're not perfect, but I really love how they came out. Like, it's exactly what I was envisioning. So yeah, so that was my first little experiment. And then, you know, I've got all this ink, so I'm like, what else can I do with it? And I thought that I would really like to continue on this theme of doing a two-color print, but I wanted to try some different methods. So the next idea that I had was to do like a single block, but cut into pieces and ink them separately. And I've sort of done it before, but it was more like two completely separate blocks that didn't necessarily fit together, that I could just like print next to each other. So I knew that the idea could work, but I wasn't sure so much about the like piecing it together part. So I thought it would be a good idea to do just like a little test on a little square that I had left over from a different project. So I did this one right here, which is just a little grapefruit, and I specifically thought grapefruit because of the color and also because I really like grapefruit. It's very kind of graphic and fun. So I did that with just like a really simple striped background. Again, this is not perfect by any means, but you know, I just wanted to experiment with the like splitting apart of it and putting it back together, and I think that this one also turned out really great. So I'll show you the little two pieces, kind of how they fit together, and then the actual print, which I thought came out super cute. Is it perfect? No. I do have some small issues kind of around the edge here where I didn't do a very good job of cutting it, but I also was not being that careful with it. The other problem that I ran into was that when I went to press on it, the pieces were kind of coming apart a little bit and did get a little bit skewed, as you can see kind of right along this edge here. But I think that that could potentially be fairly easily resolved by making a little, I don't know what you would call it, a jig, I guess, where all the pieces sit inside and it kind of holds it all together. So before I got too far into this project, I figured that this would be a good time for you guys to kind of jump in and see how I do this. I know that I've been getting some requests for like a tutorial video, and I am by no means an expert. I don't have a lot of like years doing this under my belt, but I have learned quite a bit in the 2 or so years that I've been working on Lino. So I'm just wanting to share the little bit that I've learned, my tips and tricks, and if it helps anybody, super. That's really all I want. No gatekeeping here. I want everybody to have fun and experiment with all kinds of art media and just have a good time. So that all being said, I've got a sketch that I've made, and I'll put some video up so you guys can see how I did the sketch. But basically I drew it in my sketchbook. I can actually show you. This is my current sketchbook with all my cool stickers. I'll put links for all of these. And then let's see. So here you can see some of my like initial ideas that I was kind of thinking about, and this is more along the lines of what I landed on with a little bit of color just to kind of get a sense of what it might look like colored in. And this is really where I landed, and I took a picture of this onto Procreate just to kind of straighten and refine everything and make it the size that I wanted. Initially, I was planning on using this size, which is what I did all of my last set in, but this time around I thought that I wanted to go a little bit bigger. I wanted something that would make a little bit more of an impact, and just be a little bit like nicer to see in a frame. So I decided to get a slightly larger piece that I'm going to cut down just a touch. So yeah, took it to Procreate, set the canvas size to the size that I wanted to make the print, and did a quick sketch and then printed it out. So this is my printout of my design. It's not shaded, or there's no like lines where I'm going to cut for dimension. It's really just the line work portion of it. I find that I make a lot of the decisions when it comes to the values and things as I'm working, so don't really have too many tips and tricks there. It's a little bit intuition based, a little bit winging it, which if you know me, is my, like, I don't know, mantra almost. And yeah, but I think that having the line work is super helpful. Now, as far as transferring this goes, the way that I like to do it, and if this, like I said, helps anybody, great, but I keep it pretty simple. I generally will make a printout or draw directly on some copy paper, because I know if I draw my image on some copy paper, you know, fairly cleanly, then I can just flip that over and transfer it directly to my Lino. The main trick is to use a pencil that's soft. This is a Blackwing matte pencil, which I think is, as far as I know, their like softest one that they make. But I would say, you know, anything softer than like a 4B would probably work just fine. So I'm going to trace over all of this, make a couple little corrections that I'm already seeing, and then we'll transfer it over using, you know, the back of a spatula. So I'm going to set you guys on time lapse, and we'll talk a little bit about the like process of all of this, and I'll take you guys along with me on the carving and printing and all of that. So let's switch over to time lapse mode. Alright, so I've traced everything, and this is my block, and it does fit on here even though it looks like it's almost too small, but I think it'll be fine. This is my trusty printmaking spatula, which is very well worn, and I use it for burnishing instead of a Baron usually. Sometimes I feel like with a Baron, one, I can't get enough pressure on it, and then two, it for whatever reason is less comfortable to my hand. So this is what I typically use for burnishing, until at least I get a actual press. So printed my image out, traced over it with a pencil. Now I'm going to flip it onto the block and line it up really good, and then I just press it on there. Usually with a 4B or whatever, anything softer than that will transfer just fine. I always like to look at my block and make sure there's no blemishes on it, because that would suck to find out after. So like sometimes when you get these in the package and stuff, I don't know if you guys can see that there's like a little bit of an indentation there. You want to definitely avoid stuff like that, because stuff like that will come out on your print. That's another reason, or a good reason, not to stack your prints on top of each other or your blocks on top of each other, because little things can make indentions. Let's transfer the image. Make sure everything's clean. I can see through this just enough to like line everything up, so it's just plain old copy paper. I want to make sure everything is straight, since I've got some vertical lines in the background. And just so that this doesn't move around, I'm going to stick a little bit of tape on it. And I just do the tape on one side so that I can kind of hinge it up if I need to check to make sure everything is transferring okay. Alright, so keep it nice and taut and start burnishing. And because this is only line work, if it doesn't transfer perfectly, that's totally okay. Alright, so I'm going to keep holding it, but I just want to take a quick peek and make sure that it is actually transferring. So far looking good. And you don't want to go over it too much, because sometimes if you do, your transfer can skew and it makes the lines kind of doubled. So just commit, like do it once and commit. Alright, so there's my image. Peel this off. And we're pretty much ready to carve now. I'm going to put you back on time-lapse mode, since this is a pretty lengthy process, and I'll talk through kind of what I'm thinking as I'm doing this, how I like to work and all of that. And hopefully it will all make sense. Okay, first things first, I'm making a nice straight cut with a T-square. I started carving here immediately, but I typically tint my block first. I'll show that to you in a moment, but basically I just get acrylic ink, put a couple of drops down, and spread it really thinly. It really helps to do this because then you can see where you're carving. The ink doesn't interfere with the carving process at all, and it's extremely helpful. I typically use a color like orange or like a magenta, something like that, to where you'll still be able to see your line work underneath. So as far as the carving process goes, the thing that I can most easily compare it to is drawing on black paper with a white pen. You're basically carving out all the highlights. It can be kind of difficult to wrap your head around if you don't have practice. So if you want to practice this idea, a good way to do it is in Procreate, color your background black and draw with white. That will really get you kind of into the mindset of how this all works. Another thing that I will mention is just off to the side, I have my reference where I can see it, but it's reversed. So if you are working from your drawing, make sure to print out a copy that is in reverse so that you can have something to look at. It gets really confusing if you're looking at it backwards. This is the aftermath. Lino printing is messy, y'all. So here I'm doing a little bit of ink on my piece just to kind of see where the areas are that I need to clean up. And from there, I will print a little quick proof just to make sure everything is the way I want it. From here, I'm pretty happy with how everything looks. I know that some of the areas that don't look as defined as they need to be will be defined by the two different colors. So I'm ready to move on to the next step. And now comes the really tricky part that I'm extremely nervous about, which is cutting this into multiple pieces. I left the ink on here. This is a water-based ink so that I could see really clearly like where the lines are. So just to confirm with myself, it's coming around this way and then down and then across through this little bit here, up and that way. And then the second piece is here. The leaf stays with the green part and then down and across there. So I'm going to cut this one much more carefully than I did the last one, just because I want it to be more precise. So fingers crossed and wish me luck. Here we go. Okay, back to voiceover mode. For this part of the process, I'm using an X-Acto blade instead of the speedball tool. This just gives me a lot more control and precision. That being said, this was really tricky to do. It's hard because the speedy carve is pretty thick. So I had to do several passes and, it involved kind of splitting the block a little bit to kind of really get in there, which was kind of dodgy, to be honest. But in the end, it all worked out. I will say that this part of the video is less a tutorial and more a watch me do this crazy thing. But hopefully, if this is something that you want to try, you can just kind of observe how I did it, and hopefully it will all make sense. The main tip that I have for this is, one, to work very deliberately, and two, not to move on to another area until you're all the way through with the area that you're working in. It's really hard to go back to an area that you've already cut without potentially cutting in the wrong spot again. And it makes it really kind of rough on the inside, if that makes sense. Okay, this part of the video is pretty long, so I'm speeding it up, but I will talk a little bit about what I'm doing here. So basically, I'm getting some black and white and mixing it with my green so that I can make a gradient. Make sure that when you do a gradient that your colors are all right next to each other so that you get good coverage. I put a little bit of the straight green right in between the two colors so that I'd have a nice smooth gradient. And use your palette knife to move the ink around so that, like I said, they're right by each other and the length of the ink is more or less equal to the length of your roller. Now let's talk about inking this thing. So obviously you want to choose rollers that are the right size, especially when you're doing a gradient, so that you get a smooth transition from colors without going over the area and mixing it all together. So I chose the big roller for the green part because it was a little bit wider, and then a smaller roller for the orange parts since those pieces were cut a little bit thinner. The green one was pretty easy to do. The orange one, however, there's a little bit of a tricky part, and that is the vertical lines in the background. I had to roll those at a diagonal so that I didn't get the roller inside of the parts that I had carved. So just keep that in mind when you are, making design choices and things like that. You also want to avoid like big white areas because those can also get dirty when you roll them. Putting this thing together was a little bit tricky, but luckily the Speedy Carve is pretty flexible, so I was able to kind of maneuver it and bend it so that I could get the pieces together. And now I'm just burnishing and hoping for the best, basically. I always like to pick up the corners a little bit just to check and make sure that the ink has got the coverage that I want. With this particular one, re-inking is not very much of an option because it's a gradient, so a little bit trickier as far as that's concerned. Okay, so now we're ready for the final reveal. I was definitely holding my breath on this, just praying that I got the coverage that I wanted and that nothing shifted. But I will say that I am very happy with the results. I think that these turned out great. I really love the contrast of the color and the brightness of that orange. And I just think it's such a cute, fun, kind of summery print. So I will be putting these in my shop. There's only a couple of them because this was kind of a test. I wasn't sure how it was all going to turn out, so I only rolled out a little bit of ink. But yeah, they'll be available in my coffee shop. If you guys are interested in purchasing one of these, please check out the shop. I think next up I will be trying a reduction print. I'm really looking forward to figuring all of that out. So if you have liked this video and like this content and are not subscribed, subscribe so that you can come along with me on that little journey. And with that, I will end the video. I hope you guys have enjoyed this, and I will catch you guys on the next one.